Today we're discussing Beyond the Game, Cultivating Self-Identity and Mental Wellness. We're going to be looking at, it's going to be featuring the movie Inside Out. And again, thank you so much for joining us. So as I said, I'm the founder and CEO of Stay in the Game LLC, where we provide holistic therapy to athletes and their families, ultimately helping them to excel in their respective sport and in the community. I'll let you guys read at your leisure. We also welcome partnerships and sponsorships to be able to create, community initiatives. So one of the things I want to start with today is self-identity versus identity. So I believe it's important to build a foundation based upon you understanding who you are. So ask yourself this question, especially my youth, but also including adults, no matter what place you find yourself at in life, who are you? And the reason I pose that question is because as we continue to navigate through life and hopefully evolve, we have to ask the question, who am I? Where do I find myself at in life? Under self-identity, you see, how do you see yourself? Because your self-perception is really key. You know, the perception of other people, which we'll get into in identity, to a degree, it's important, but how you see yourself will also cause you to move a certain way throughout life. So self-identity includes the qualities that you have. Do you find yourself to be a caring person? Are you that genuine person that tries to, help meet a need when you can, even though you cannot meet all needs? Are you that kind of person that sees someone and you're wondering if you can find them additional support, even if that's not you? Would you say you're a person that a quality that you possess may be, if you find the need to apologize to a friend or a parent or a coach or whoever your support system may consist of, are you that person that can look inside and pull from that quality? Self-identity also includes beliefs. What or who has shaped your belief system? We're not referring per se to your family history or your last name or all the hype that surrounds you as it pertains to our athletes. What we're referring to is, what do you believe about yourself? What are those quiet thoughts or loud thoughts when nobody's around? What does your belief system consist of? Okay. Is it more positive or negative, or is it in between? Or are you in the phase where you're just not sure? Because that's a great place to be in. You can build from there. Self-identity also includes experiences and values, what you hold dear. Like, would it be family? Would it also, of course, be your sport? Would it be something you're good at outside of sports? Because that's important. How you build your self-identity also is how you separate yourself from the game. The game is maybe one of the things you do extremely well, but it's not in totality who you are, because at some point you have to transition from the game. So that's why my business is also called Stay in the Game, because it refers to sports, in which we love, but it also refers to who you are as a person. So stay in the game of life, friendships, relationships. So stay focused on the things that really matter, okay? Self-identity also includes, of course, I already said, self-perception and evolving. And it's not limited to these things, but these are core things that I find to be helpful, not just for youth, but for adults as well. So self-identity versus identity. So social roles, events, or groups that you're, affiliated with, I don't know. I think it's a little too young maybe for sororities, but just, could be Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, or with your coaches. You'll see this image to my right here where it says student athlete, student first, because you're a person, that's what matters. And when sport is no longer there, whether it's because of an injury or it was time just to kind of separate from it, you have to, at that point, be a student, or just be able to identify yourself where you are in life, whether at that point, if you're a young adult or adult. And your support systems may include all these that I have right here surrounded around you, the dietitian, the trainer, the coaches, everyone there and some more, maybe a pastor, a mentor. Sometimes we pull from those people who are in our lives, but at the same token, where you identify with them, or depending upon how you are perceived by them, you still have to be able to revert back to your self-identity. Because what if one of those people in your life is having an off day? Like, not like they're off from work, but like maybe they skipped a meal by accident and they're just not there mentally on that day and they're tired. You still have to know who you are and be able to function in the capacity that you believe about yourself. So I ask you again, who are you? And if by the end of my presentation, you still don't know who you are because it takes time, I understand that. It's taking me time. And I'm still evolving to that point, because again, we find ourselves changing as we evolve. Okay. So why is mental wellness and mental health important? Mental wellness encompasses various aspects of psychological well-being, which means we all have mental health. So let me speak to that for a moment, because I put a smiley face there mainly because sometimes the stigma that, or a lot of times the stigma that is attached to mental health is automatically assumed to be, oh, something's wrong, something is this, or people are giving looks. The truth is we all have mental health. And what I mean by that is we all have physical health, we all have emotional health. And so we don't look at physical health like something's wrong. We look at it like it's a part of how we function to move about throughout our day. If somebody's struggling in their physical health, they go to the doctor, right? Or they see a trainer, whatever the case may be. Emotional health is no different. We both have to, both as in youth and adults, have to work hard to regulate our emotions. And sometimes it's really hard. So as it relates to mental health, we all have a mind, we all have a brain. How's your mental today? Meaning, are you feeling, very anxious? Are you feeling like low? Have you never experienced like depression or anxiety, but all of a sudden it's hitting you where you are today? Because that's the thing. It's not always something that you have maybe had challenges with throughout your life. Sometimes it just pops up, kind of like performance anxiety or things of that nature. Whatever the case may be, I'm hoping that what you gained from me today is awareness and understanding that who you are is more than enough. But we have to do the work to assess who we want to be. Going back to self-identity. So mental health, we all have, but not everybody may struggle with a certain challenge in the same way or as often. So mental health and mental wellness also includes emotional stability, resilience, positive outlook, self-awareness. You're not being selfish per se, but you are taking time to do a self-assessment, which means go through your mind and think about the things that perhaps, you need to improve on, things that you do very well, but maybe you need to set boundaries on because you're overextending yourself, whatever the case may be. This also includes purpose and meaning. Our mental wellness, overall well-being includes what is your purpose in life? What do you want it to be? And how you answer that is also to consider things that you may be good at outside of your sport. What can you add to somebody else's life or add to your own? Things that you may think is the smallest thing that you couldn't do that outside of sport or make a career out of it, that very well may not be the case, okay? So we all need to have meaning to our life because we all do. We just need to tap into it. And sometimes it may take some time, okay? So just stay in the game. Don't count yourself out. So then we also have productivity and fulfillment. So how well you do things, how consistent you are with it, how disciplined you are. And it can definitely be a work in progress, but you will get there if you keep going. And that will bring a level of fulfillment. All right, mental health in youth athletes. Some common challenges that we see in our youth would be anxiety, as you see the percentage there, depression, burnout, identity, eating disorders, substance use, and the list continues. These are just some common ones that's mentioned very often. Sometimes individuals, as I mentioned before, struggle with performance anxiety or just anxiety in general. And then sometimes if that goes unmanaged for too long, it can cause athletes to go into a slump because they're concerned about maybe losing their position, what people are going to be thinking, if they can go to their coach, and they may have a supportive coach and that tells them to get your head in the game. But what does that actually look like when you feel like your mind is all over the place? So then you have burnout because athletes often push themselves so hard because that brings motivation, and it does. But at the same time, you have to create a balance, which is where the self-identity comes in at, because you're not your sport. You were gifted with the opportunity to do your sport very well, but you don't want to burn yourself out by overdoing, okay? And so then we have identity, what do we identify as? How do we identify with the different affiliations we have? Are you a leader? Are you considered a leader in your sport on the field, but also in the classroom? Are you a leader at home? Are you a leader with your siblings or family? Things of that nature, okay? So for age groups, late childhood, ages like 8 to 11, engaging in sport tends to protect against mental disorders. So we know that sports is great. I'm a sports lover. My favorite one is basketball. Love football. You can't take me away from it. So we know that sports tend to help people and help our athletes because it keeps them focused and gives them a level of direction. But in early adolescence, ages 12 through 14, anxiety and depression symptoms become more measurable, which means you start to see it more and you can see a trend with it. Okay. So then we have our mid to late adolescence, 15 through 18. Symptoms occur more often and athletes begin to internalize the symptoms. They start thinking more. They don't really express what they're feeling outwardly. Or with that, they start thinking negative thoughts and they continue doing it, especially if they're not talking to anyone. So they begin thinking they are the symptom versus that self-identity that they actually probably worked on prior to. So they focus on that more than they focus on their qualities and beliefs. Female athletes, it's reported that female athletes often report more anxiety and depression than males. Okay, so since we talked about the statistics in a sense for mental health youth athletes, let's talk about the barriers that keep athletes from seeking assistance. So youth athletes are less likely to seek mental health support due to the stigmas, centered around it, which is why I stated initially that we all have mental health. That's not something necessarily that I was even privy to when I was growing up. Not because mental health was something we avoided in our home or our household, but it was just something that never became a topic of discussion. It wasn't until I got older that I started taking interest in it because I love people and I want to help people. And then I love sports, so I try to figure out how to couple the two. So kind of bringing awareness, or definitely bringing awareness to the point where you have that support from your coaches, you have it from your parents, and not everybody will understand it because it's taken, some time to understand it and get to this point. But the point is bringing awareness so that you don't have to hide in the shadows and you don't have to be ashamed. We're all growing and learning. Okay. So then what's another barrier? Fear of appearing weak. Again, like something is quote unquote wrong. We all have things we're working on, but it's not that something is wrong. It's just you are human and you're trying to be the best person that you can be. But there is something that may need more attention than another area. Another reason may be limited access to sport-informed mental health providers. So that's one of the things that I do, but also I'm sure that that's one of the things that Jamila offers. So basically access to someone who can assist you with it, with what you're dealing with, or your coach is having that resource. All right. So less than 40% of adolescents, less than 40% of adolescent athletes report feeling comfortable discussing mental health with a coach. Again, that can be contributed to the fact that they feel like if they share how they feel with their coach, they may lose their spot, they may have to sit on the sidelines, or they may get quote unquote fussed at, which we know that in coaching, we love, our coaches is pushing our youth. We know in coaching, there's a level of motivation that they provide. The other, leaders may not provide in the same way, but they want to be able to have that comfortability to share. And if the coach doesn't know what to do, it's okay, because that's why we have mental health providers that can be used as a resource. So we've discovered that there are warning signs to consider for student athletes. So we have the percentage of mental challenges that athletes struggle with, and there are many more. We also have the barriers. So now we have warning signs to kind of look for. So a sudden drop in academic or athletic performance, withdrawal from teammates, family, or friends, a change in sleep, eating habits, extreme mood swings or irritability. Now, we're not talking about that you're a little hangry. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the extreme. Like it went from a high to a low or vice versa. It's not something that could be pinpointed. So these are warning signs to consider, not just, they're acting out because they're a team. Well, that could be the case, but you don't want to always, assume it's that. Don't overlook the fact that they're an athlete and they're probably always in go mode. And even if they're not an athlete, again, because they're a person first. Okay. So then there may be physical signs of stress, frequent injuries. We all know that an injury of any sort can get in an athlete's mind because they're thinking, oh my God, how long am I going to have to have surgery? How long is it going to take? Am I going to be back? Just all these things. So these weigh on the athlete, which can cause them to go into those symptoms we previously discussed and more. Risky behavior or substance use, just kind of hauling off, just doing whatever, to avoid the feeling of maybe an injury or things they're dealing with. So something to mask it, so just risky behavior. And then expressions of hopelessness or talking about self-harm. Now, coaches, parents, support systems, I know it's hard to hear your child come to you and talk about the fact that they feel helpless, they feel hopeless, and they talk about self-harm and or suicide, it's like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do at this point? I get that. So that's why we want to make sure that you know there are mental health resources out here to help. And even with that, there's not, if we're talking about therapy, there's not just one particular therapist for everybody in the population. Sometimes it does take a minute to actually find the person or personality that suits you. And it's not per se because you're going to get along so well. It's because they see you for who you are, and they want you to see yourself as a person that is okay and that's continuing to grow. All right. It's okay to bring your need. And in a sense, it's a safe space. Okay. All right. So just keep in mind these warning signs as we transition. And I have to be mindful of time. So the power of emotions. So number one, emotions are not roadblocks, they're signals. They shape how we see ourselves and our place in the world. Like athletes, emotions have positions. Okay. So they have to know the role that they play. So emotions are not bad. All right. So if I describe an emotion to you, it doesn't mean you're weak because you're experiencing it. It means that you're human because you experience it. If somebody passes away in someone's family, you need a certain emotion to be able to empathize with them. All right. If somebody has a concussion, you need a certain emotion to be able to support them through that. All right. In sports, we're taught to push through, but emotional avoidance doesn't build mental strength. Okay. If you avoid what you're feeling, it's always just going to resurface again until you address it. So just bear that in mind as we move forward, because your emotions can either take you, forward, or they can stop you in your steps. Well, I have a couple YouTube videos, but I don't think we're going to have time to get to them. When it helps versus when it takes over. So anger as an emotion. This emotion likes a spark, of fairness, to be able to use it as a challenge when boundaries are crossed. So let's say you're advocating for someone. In other words, you're speaking up for somebody who has been mistreated. You may become angry, but you're using your voice as a tool in a positive way. Anger, when it's not using a positive way, which was going to be in the movie Inside Out, which you can look at your own leisure. I encourage you to, both of them, 1 and 2. Anger can show up when you just don't want to hear anything from anybody. You just explode. So in the movie, the young lady's name is Riley, and she exploded at the table. So that was something where she allowed anger to overpower her, in a sense, take over. I want, you to consider athletes, think of a moment when frustration just kind of overtook you from a bad call. How did you see yourself in that moment, and what could you have done differently? All right. In my 3 minutes. All right. So anxiety, navigating fear and worry. This came from the second movie, Inside Out. So use anxiety as, and I am saying this as I recently experienced that on my last speaking engagement. Went on the stage, read it, and all of a sudden, I believe performance anxiety just hit me. No one knew, but all these thoughts kept running. And if you're able to look at the movie Inside Out, when there's a hockey scene, I believe it's number 2, you'll see what I'm referring to. Just random thoughts came that I was not even thinking of. I don't even know where it came from. But in that moment, I had to be able to battle with my mind. So it was me versus me. And so no one knew what was happening, but I had to control my breathing. I had to remind myself without saying it out loud, because, I was on stage. I had to remind myself of who I am and why I was there and what I'm purposed to do. And so that was a complete battle, which caused me to live up to my business name, stay in the game. And so I'm just grateful to be able to say that to you, because we're no different. It could hit anybody anywhere. So use anxiety as an alertness. Anxiety often signals that something important is at stake. So you're meant to be there. So why do we have anxiety? We don't necessarily control the thoughts that come in, but we can utilize strategies to help us when they come. They come to you can use it to sharpen your focus. So we're going to jump down to athlete connection. We're going to jump down key insights. The goal is not to eliminate anxiety, but to transform it into preparation, not paralysis. Okay. Complete emotional spectrum. So joy you can use for motivation and celebration, anger for assertiveness and pushing boundaries, fear for good judgment and caution. All right. Sadness for processing setbacks and building empathy, and anxiety for protection and preparation for potential threats. So you're talking about teamwork. Your emotions are meant to work together, not to overtake you. All right. I'm sorry I have to brush through the PowerPoint. We're going to blame it on technology. So from emotion to identity, identity isn't built from highlights. It's built from healing. Emotions plus experience equals clarity. You are allowed to evolve. In fact, you must, because if you stay the same, then what does that mean? You just celebrate another birthday. And these are not things, again, that I am just pushing on my youth. These are things that I have also had to do and still doing. That's how I know you can do it. All right. And I'm not doing it on my own. Okay. So we're going to go to, our coping strategies. All right. Probably in like my 30 seconds. We have the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, where you engage in all your 5 senses, something you can see, something you can feel, something you can hear, something you can smell, something you can taste. We have the in and out breathing. You hold it for 4 seconds, 2 seconds, and then 6 seconds. Abstract drawing, one of my favorites. I used to be an art teacher for 12 years, hence the ability that I'm talking a lot. So abstract drawing allows you just to do whatever, and there's no pressure. It's your art, and it's literally what you make it. Okay. Drawing anime. I have one of my friends loves anime. And so this is very important because it allows you to be able to express what it is you do in a way that really just suits you, self-identity, what you like. Texture stress ball. So I just happen to have my basketball here, again, because I love sports. And this really helps to shift my mind from what I may be concerned about to what I need to focus on. In conclusion, mental health resource would be 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. I used to work for them as a chat counselor, and it's completely anonymous, so you can chat in from your phone. Or Athlete Talk, which is a mental health and wellness app that I also serve on that committee as well. But the founder is Dr. Emmett Gill, who is an amazing mental health therapist. Okay, and this is how you can stay connected. All right, if you want to reach out and discuss more. Jamila, thank you so much for having me. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
Can you share your last screen really quick so I could take a picture, please? Or drop your information in the chat, either one.
Oh, hold on. Let me get the chat back up too. You want to share it again, Alisha? Okay.
Thank you.
Were there any other questions?
I don't know if time will permit, but I really enjoyed this session, Alisha. Yeah, there I am. One thing I wanted to say that stuck out is like the things that you pinpointed in terms of like the signs to look for. Do you associate that with, or do you believe there's any correlation with children that are specializing in sports? Like, is there, more anxiety when they're just like in a specialized, like they're only playing basketball, or like I have kids that have done like basketball, football, soccer. I feel like they kind of have more of a grasp at some of the mental aspects of it. But I just wanted to know from your professional experience, do you think there's any correlation to when they're specialized in a particular sport?
Thank you, Jenny, for that question. I appreciate that. I don't particularly think there is, but I will say I've noticed with football players, because of the level, that's a high contact sport. So because of the interaction with concussions and I would say the impact on that and the brain swelling, if it's repetitive concussions that are taking place, it can pretty much cause, I guess, if there's a symptom that was already pre-existing, it'll cause it to advance even more. And of course, with CTE, we don't want any of our athletes to go away from here prematurely, but that can only be studied once someone has passed away. But even with that, I think sometimes that's brushed under the rug. So sometimes athletes suffer, in that particular sport in silence because they don't want to, I guess, spotlight the anxiety or depression or mood swings that they're experiencing. I would say perhaps football more than others. But of course, we know definitely in NBA, many, players have come out and talked about their mental health more. So the pressures they're pretty prevalent in all sports.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.